Today I want to talk to you about building command line applications. If you were to build a command line application today, what language, what framework, what tools would you use to build it in? Bash comes to mind, but I don't use Bash every single day. So writing something in Bash would take a lot of Googling and Stack Overflowing and probably ChatGPT these days to figure out how to put this program together. What if you could use the tools and the languages and the frameworks that you're used to using every single day to build a command line application? Well, of course you can. And today we're going to talk about Spring Shell. Spring Shell allows you to use the programming model, the tools, the frameworks, the languages that you're used to using every single day to build command line applications. We're going to have some fun with this today. We're going to build a new Spring application that uses Spring Shell, and we're going to build a command line application called dad joke. And all it's going to do is reach out to a public API to get a random dad joke. That way, if you're ever stuck on the shell and you're just a little bit down or the weather's a little bit crazy and you need a pick-me-up, you can type dad joke, get a random dad joke, have a good laugh, and move on with your day. So that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to start by heading over to start.spring.io. We're going to create a new project. I'm going to create a Java project. I'm going to use Maven. I'm using the latest stable release of Spring Boot, which is 3.0.3 at the time of this recording. I'm going to go ahead and say dev.danvega. The artifact is going to be dad joke. And we will go ahead and use jar, Java 17, and we'll need a few dependencies. So I'm going to use the Spring Shell dependency. I'm also going to pull in the Graal native support. We'll talk about why we're going to use that later. And I'm also going to bring in the WebFlux support, so Spring Reactive Web. And again, we'll talk about that as we get into the application. So what I want to do now is go ahead and generate this, download this zip file, and I'll open it up in my favorite IDE, which is IntelliJ. You can open it up in whatever IDE or text editor you are most productive in. All right, so here we are in IntelliJ. The first thing I'm going to do, I like to just refactor and rename this to application. I don't know why. I haven't come up with a good reason, but I like to do it, so here we are. So the first thing I want to jump into is a little bit of an introduction to Spring Shell, because when you're working in the context of the web, we understand that there's classes like controllers that kind of take in requests and return responses, but we're not working with the web, right? We're working with a command line. So how do we work with a command line? Well, I'm going to create a new package here. I'm going to call this commands. We work with these classes called commands, and I'm going to just create a simple hello command. We'll call this hello command, and we'll talk about how we can write functionality within this class that we can interact with on the command line. Well, it all starts with the top level annotation of a shell component. So if we jump into shell component, it indicates that the annotated class may contain shell methods, themselves annotated with shell method. That is, methods that may be invoked reflectively by the shell. So the shell component you can think of as kind of like a at configuration. It says, you know, on the configuration side of things, that's going to say, hey, I'm going to contain bean definitions, right? The shell component is saying, I'm going to contain shell methods. This is where you want to look for those methods at. So once you have that top level annotation, now we can start to create these methods. So let's have a method that is called hello, and all it's going to do is return the words hello world. And then let's go ahead and have one that is going to say goodbye. Return. Okay, so now that we have those methods, now we need to add some annotation so that Spring will pick them up and understand that these in the context of a shell application are what we should be calling. So we're going to use that shell method annotation. That shell method annotation, if we jump into it, has a few things, two of which we're going to focus on here. So key and default. The key is the method can be invoked via Spring Shell. So this is the name of the method that we want to invoke from the command line. So in our case, we'll call the first one hello. The value is a description for the command. And these are very helpful because as you'll see, once we launch the application, when we get onto the command line and type help, you get some helpful information about what commands are available, and these descriptions are very helpful for that. So let's say that the key for this is going to be hello, and the value is I will say hello. In this case, it's not all that helpful, but we get it. So we're going to copy that. We're going to paste this down here. We're going to say goodbye. I will say goodbye. All right, so that's enough to get us started. So let's go down to our application and run our application. And you see the first thing that might be a little bit different to you is once it's started and ready to go, it'll drop us into a shell. So from there, we have some built-in commands. So one of which we can type is help. So if we type the help command, we get some information about the built-in commands and then the commands that we have created. So you can see that these are grouped by the name of the class. So this is hello command. I would probably refactor this to say hello commands, but this is just a demo, so who cares? But we have these hello commands. You can also get more information about each of these. So I can say help, hello, hello. And that will say, here's the name of it, here's the synopsis, and then options. We don't have any options on this yet, but we will. And when we do, it'll give you information about the argument types. So I know that I can run the command hello and goodbye. So if I just type anything here, it's going to say, hey, I don't know what command you're trying to run. But if I type in the word hello, it will run that particular method. Also, we can type in goodbye and run that particular method. So far, it's pretty basic. But again, you can see how you can just use this basic infrastructure to start building command line applications in an environment that you're used to being in. All the rules of Spring apply here. If you want to use dependency injection, if you want to go off, create a different class that talks to a database, all the things that you're used to doing in a Spring app, you can do. So I want to show you one more here. We can do the shell option. So the shell option is going to say, this is used to customize the handling of a shell method parameter. So what's available to us in here? So the value, this key is the actual parameter name. So in this case, we'll call this like a suffix maybe, or just a message. And then we can also have a default value, which is really great. All right, so I can set a default value here, and we'll call this world. And then I will say that the name of this argument is going to just be arg. So now I have a default value for this particular argument that's getting passed in. And what I'll do is I will display hello arg, and we'll say that. So now if I pass in an argument, we can say hello Dan, or hello John, or hello Marie, instead of hello world. So let's try that. But then we also got that default value. So if nothing is passed in, it will do that. So let's just do that first. So hello, we'll type in hello world, hello, and I'm going to pass in an argument of Dan. And now it says hello Dan. So again, those are kind of the basic constructs. Those are really all you need to get started. But I would head over to the documentation. There's a little bit more to learn when it comes to like shell options and setting up these commands and grouping them. And there's a different way to register them if you want to. But this is enough to get you going, and it's enough to get us going in creating our little dad joke CLI. All right, so here I am over on the icanhasdadjoke.com website. We're just looking at the API docs. You can see that there's no authentication required for this API, which is great. It makes it easier to kind of just get up and running with. You'll see that all endpoints follow the respective browser URLs. You need to add an accept header. If you do not, you will get back text plain by default. So we want to make sure that we send the accept header to make sure we get back some application/JSON. So that's one of the things. So we'll hit just the get endpoint. So the get endpoint for this will return a random joke. and it will return to us an ID, a joke, and a status. So I think that is a really good place to get started. Figuring out what we should build is by modeling our response. All right, so I'm going to start with a new model here. We'll call this, actually, let's just create a new class. We're going to call this dad joke. Let's put this in model. We'll call this dad joke response. And this is going to be a record. And we're going to just have a ID, a joke, and an integer for status. And that's it. That's all we need to represent our dad joke response. So now what we need is a dad joke command similar to this hello one. So we're going to call this dad joke commands. And in our dad joke commands here, we will go ahead and create a new method. Let's say public. Let's just start with a void. I'm not sure what we're going to probably return a string, and we'll call this get random dad joke, right? So we're going to return something here. Oops. Let's just return that for now. Public. So get random dad joke. So to make this happen, what we need to do is we need to fetch the contents of that API. So we need a way to call out to our API. So in a normal Spring application, we have some options, right? If we're in an MVC app, we could use the REST template. If we're in a WebFlux app or reactive app, we can use the web client. Because we're on Spring Boot 3 and Spring Framework 6, we can use the HTTP interfaces. So we can define an interface and have Spring turn that into an implementation for us at runtime. So I like that idea. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create a new Java class. We're going to call this the dad joke client. And we're going to put this in a client package. Okay, so we know that we're going to end up making a GET request to that, and then the root endpoint. So the way that you usually set up a client is you'll have a base URL. So I'm going to consider all of this right here, the base, and then an endpoint that we're going to hit for each of the methods here inside of our client. First off, this has to be an interface too, so let's go ahead and change that. And then we're going to go ahead and define the method. So the method is going to return a dad joke response. Now, this is the great thing about setting up HTTP interfaces here. We are using the web client underneath the hood, but based on the return type, we'll determine if it's blocking or non-blocking. In this case, it's blocking, but if you wanted to set this up to be a non-blocking call, you could easily come in here and say this is going to be a mono of dad joke response. So we're going to have a dad joke response, and we'll just call this random. So with that in place, we need to go ahead and set the annotation here to define what type of request this is going to be. So there is an HTTP exchange that allows you to define the URL, the request method, but there are also specialized versions of this. So we're going to say get exchange, and what is the endpoint that we're going to hit? And it's just the slash, because the rest of this is going to be the base URL. Okay. So with that in place, we're almost ready. We go back to our application. We just need a way to go ahead and set up that client. So we're going to do that by creating a bean, and we're going to return the dad joke client, right? And I'm going to call this dad joke client. And the way that we're going to create this is we're going to start with a web client, and we're going to use the web client builder. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Client is equal to web client builder. That's pretty right. But we're going to set a couple of things in here. So let's set the base URL to whatever that was before, right? Let's go back here, grab that. And that's now our base URL. Now, Here's where I missed the step when I was going through this the first time. We need to set a default header. That I need to somewhere tell the service that I'm calling that here's a header that I want you to go ahead and use. And that header is that accept header, because we don't want text back. We want actually application/JSON back. So we'll set the accept header and we'll say that this is application/JSON. So with that in place, then we can build that. Once we have that, we just need to use the HTTP service proxy factory. So HTTP service proxy factory, we'll just call this factory is equal to proxy factory dot builder, and this is going to take in the web client adapter for client, and that client is going to be the client that we just built, and we're going to go ahead and build that. So once we have that, we can go ahead and return it. So return factory.create client, and the client that we're creating is the dad joke client. So a little bit of boilerplate there, but I save this in a web template whenever I need it and just output it. And now with that in place, when we create our application, Spring will turn this client interface into an actual implementation for us. So we don't have to figure out the glue that is to write a client to call another service and make things happen. So now that we have a client, we need it in our dad joke commands. And this is where, for me, things get really nice and interesting, because now I'm back in a familiar programming environment. Now I know if I need an instance of that client, we can use dependency injection. So I'm just going to say private final dad joke client, and we'll get an instance through constructor injection. And now that I have that, I should be able to get a dad joke response. And I can do that by using the dad joke client dot random, and we know that that returns a dad joke response. From that random, we know that there are 3 properties in there: string ID, string joke, and integer status. So if I want to return a string, I can just take the random dot joke, and that will return a string. All right, so let's go ahead and restart this. Well, we still have our hello commands in here, but that's okay. If I go ahead and type help, I can see that I have my hello commands and my built-in commands, because we forgot a couple things, right? So we need to make this available to the shell. So we're going to say shell component, and then this is going to be a shell method. And the key for this is going to be random, and the value is going to be a description. I will return a random dad joke. Right? So let's go ahead and restart. And let's type help again. And now you see we have our dad joke commands and our hello commands. So I'm going to type random. And you will see we are animal fact number 25. Most bobcats are not named Bob. I like it. Let's try it one more time and get another random joke. How many apples grow on a tree? All of them. That's great. So I'm going to come up here and click stop, and my application will be stopped. And now we can talk about one more thing. So we have this nice little application. I'm actually going to delete my hello commands because I don't need them now. And what I want to do now is I want to turn this into an application that I can use from my command line. Well, a great way to do this is by turning this into a native application. So I want to turn this into a native application using Spring Boot 3. This is pretty easy thanks to the integration with GraalVM. There are just a couple things I want to set up before I do so. So I want to make sure that when this application launches from a command line that we have some clean output, which means I don't want any logging for this. So I'm going to turn the logging level for the root off. And I also don't want the Spring banner to go ahead and start when the application starts. Normally it's okay here on my dev machine, but I want to turn this off. So I'm going to go ahead and set the banner mode equal to off. Now when I go ahead and type out my native application, I'm just going to get this clean UI right on the command line so that I can go ahead and type my commands. So with all of those in place, I think we can go ahead and create a native application. So I'm going to open up a terminal. And because we are using Maven here, I'm going to use the Maven wrapper. So Maven wrapper, and we're going to switch to a native profile, and we're just going to run native compile. And this is going to run through, and actually I just realized I probably want to skip those tests. So let's go ahead and say skip tests equals true. And now this is going to go through and compile a native application for us. All right, so build success. We can see that we have produced some artifacts. In my target directory, I have a dad joke executable. So that is the executable that will run. So that tells me if I want to go into target and run dad joke, you'll see that it immediately drops me into that shell. I can type random. And did you hear about the cheese who saved the world? It was legendary. Love it. All right, so there's our native application. So why do we want a native application? Well, the reason we want a native application is because now we can take that native application and use it on our command line. We want that instant gratification, that fast startup, that immediate startup, so that we can use it right on our command line. I'm going to copy this absolute path. You may want to go ahead and throw this in a different directory because, again, this target directory gets blown out all the time. So you want to take that dad joke native application and put it somewhere safe on your computer. I'm just going to leave it here for now, but I'm going to pop back over to the desktop and we'll go ahead and install an alias for it so that we can use it from any command line. All right, so here I am in my ZSHRC. I'm going to set up an alias for dad joke equal to whatever that path was, and then target and dad joke. So with that, I'm going to save this, close this out. I'm going to open up a terminal. And from there, I'm going to type in dad joke. You can see that I'm immediately dropped into that shell. There was no waiting 1 or 2 seconds, which doesn't seem like a lot of time for like the JVM to come up. But in this case, it is. Like I want that immediate response, and that's what you get by building a native image with Spring Boot 3 and GraalVM. So now that I'm in there, I can do the same things that I did before. I can ask for the available commands. I can go ahead and type random, and it says, "Thanks for explaining the word many to me. It means a lot." So this is great. The next time that you're on your command line and you're feeling a little down, or you live near me in Cleveland and the weather isn't that great and you're a little bit dreary, just head over to your shell and type random, and you can get a nice random dad joke that I hope will cheer you up. All right, friends, I hope that was informative. Again, all the code that we went through today will be in a GitHub repository that I will hope to link in the description below. So please look out for it there. If you found some value in this, friends, do me a huge favor. Leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends and family about the channel. That would really help me out a lot. And as always, happy coding.